So I grew up in East Point. Anybody ever been to East Point before? All right, that's what I'm talking about. So I grew up in East Point, and then I spent a good bit of time also in a city right next to it called Hapeville. Anybody ever been to Hapeville? All right, so Hapeville's got a sign, and on the way in it says "Home of." Anybody know what the home of? Jeff Foxworthy. See, y'all said Chick-fil-A, but that's not what the sign says. That's not what the sign says. The sign says the home of Jeff Foxworthy. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, we got our priorities straight in Hapeville. You know what I'm saying? It ain't about Christian chicken. It's about the Christian comedian. I don't know. We should probably put something up there. My dad and my uncle worked at the original Chick-fil-A for quite some time. I'm pretty sure they didn't get fired. I think they walked. I mean, it was fine. It doesn't matter. Anyway, in Hapeville, there's a street. There's a street that we used to live. We didn't live on the street because that would have been bad if we lived on this particular street. We lived on the street right next to it, and I grew up knowing or calling it Stewart Avenue. Anyone ever been to Stewart Avenue? Not as many hands. You're like, no, I'm not going to claim I've been to Stewart Avenue. Because how many, well, let me rephrase it. How many people have heard what Stewart Avenue is famous for? All right, cool. So Stewart Avenue is like Sauce Little Red Light District. I mean, it's about as red light district as you're going to find here in Atlanta. And that's what it was known for. And so they had this idea. They're like, you know what? Everyone knows Stewart Avenue, and everybody has this idea what Stewart Avenue is, and it has this reputation. And so we're going to change that by changing its name. Right? That's what they did. So they named it Metropolitan Parkway, right? Metropolitan Parkway. And so now we've gotten rid of all the things that happen on street. What they needed to do was bulldoze all the red light district stuff. They could have kept the street name the same. Changing the street name didn't change anything about Stewart Avenue. And then Hapeville actually took it a step further. We said, well, I mean, Metropolitan Parkway isn't southern enough, so we're going to call it Dogwood Street, Dogwood Avenue. I can't remember the difference. But either way, that was like, oh, there's a little southern charm to our red light district. I don't know. But that's when I grew up. I grew up one street over from this. And so our backyard had a fence, and that fence kept us from, I guess, all those people coming in. I don't know. I mean, there was a warehouse behind us. We saw people in and out all the time, along with rats and such. And there was nothing happening. I'm not even sure there was electricity in there, but that's where it was. And so I say that to say we have these little places in our community, and it's nothing new. Like it's nothing new at all for us to have Stewart Avenues in every part of our history as a people. In fact, there was one place in particular we're going to talk a little bit about today that was just like Stewart Avenue is for me growing up, was for a girl named Mary growing up. Let me introduce you to Mary. Luke chapter 8, verse 1 through 3. It says this: After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, and the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. Mary Magdalene. The name Magdalene was taken from the city Magdala, a town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. One historian put it this way: Magdala, it was a prosperous city with an immoral reputation. It was a Stewart Avenue, the entire thing. In fact, a lot of people it was destroyed in 67 AD by the Romans, just laid flat, completely wiped off the face of the map. Floods have then come in and overgrowth and just kind of made the city kind of disappear. There's a modern day city there now, but and they didn't know where it was at first, but it just completely covered this ancient city. And people said, oh, well, that's punishment for the immorality that was happening there. Then in 2004, there was a man by the name of Father Juan Solana, the papal appointee in charge of Notre Dame in Jerusalem, a pilgrim's guest house. And in 2004, he decided, you know what, we need a retreat center on the Sea of Galilee. Since there are so many things that happened in the ministry of Jesus around the Sea of Galilee, we needed a retreat center with this serene overlook so that people could come and contemplate the ministry and the life of Jesus. And so that's what he decided to do. It took almost a decade to go through all the red tape to be able to excavate and clear out land and to build something in this historical space. And while they were digging to set the foundation, they discovered that first century city. This was just almost about 13 years ago. 2009, 2010 is not 13 years ago. 10 years ago-ish. 10 years ago, that's when they discovered this first century city. They weren't sure what city it was, though, until they discovered the synagogue. And inside of the synagogue, they found numerous artifacts which pointed to and claimed this city, the first century city of Magdala. In fact, part of the exhibition opened just a couple of years ago, and they've only excavated 10% of the entire ancient city so far. Over 135,000 people have visited the holy site already, and more, thousands you can look it up on TripAdvisor. You can see pictures, all kind of stuff. It won a TripAdvisor award last year. And then there's a whole new exhibit opening this year, right? So that's where this city is. That's what's happening. This old, ancient, productive, yet immoral city. This Stewart Avenue city, which tells you a little bit about people who claim to come from there. You see, if I got on stage and said, hey, my name is Clint, and I'm a pastor here, and I grew up on Stewart Avenue. For those of you who grew up around there, you would think, man, that's a interesting place to grow up as a child, But I clarified. I was on the street next to Stewart Avenue, so I was clean and wholesome, right? I wasn't on that side of the street, right? Mary's first connection to Jesus, we just read about it, cast out 7 demons from her. I tell you, when it comes to reputation for Mary, she's not building much. The place where she comes from is known for things that women typically don't want to be known that they were associated with. And then on top of that, she has the stigma of being demon-possessed. In a small town like that, it's not something that just kind of gets overlooked. You become the person like, hey, that's the crazy girl, That's the crazy girl that who knows what demon possession looked like at the time in her specific case. That was her interaction with Jesus, right? A small town. The reputation spreads of who she is and what she is and the struggles that she has. Yet, these women, Mary in particular, is talked about as having an impact where they travel with Jesus and they support what he does out of their own means, out of their own pocketbook, their own resources. She had all the odds stacked against her. She was a woman in a first century where women couldn't own property, where women couldn't testify in court, where women couldn't inherit property, right? I mean, honestly, at that point in time, women were taking care of a few domestic things and birthing children. And that was pretty much the extent when it came to value that people saw in women. And so she had that was not going for her. From a town known for immorality, the stigma of demon possession, and just flat out being a woman. Yet she was devoted to Jesus. Once introduced to him, she never left his side. We're going to look at just how connected she was over the next few moments. But I thought it might be appropriate for us to begin with a question, because we will see exactly what it looks like in Mary's life, at least what we have recorded. But I think each of us should ask the very same question of ourselves. Here it is. What would Jesus have to do for you so that you would never leave him? What would Jesus have to do for you so that you would never leave him? And I don't want that to be rhetorical in terms of, okay, well, he said it, and then we're just going to move on. You don't have to say it out loud right now, but I do want you to start processing the answer. Like in the moment, what would Jesus have to do for you specifically for you to say, you know what, I'm never leaving this guy's side? For Mary, maybe it was the casting out of 7 demons and ridding her of all of that was in her life. Maybe that's what it was. We don't know. We just know that happened, and then she attaches to the hip, and she's with him through his death and after his resurrection. Let's pick it up. Matthew 27, 54 through 55. When the centurion and those with him were guarding Jesus And those who were with him regarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened. They were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely this is the Son of God." Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. All of the other followers, except for one, had fled in fear. None of them were standing around watching Jesus die. They all heard about it on the newspaper, on the internet. I'm not sure how they got news. But at some point, they heard about it secondhand. Mary is standing there watching it happen. Maybe she stayed because she was inconsequential, simply a woman in no danger, fairly insignificant. At that time, that was probably a word that she would resonate with. A woman of insignificance, demon-possessed, from a town not known for anything but immorality, and just a simple woman, insignificant. She's there when Jesus dies. She's also there to watch Jesus buried. Mark 15, 46 and 47. So Joseph brought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, placed it in the tomb cut out of a rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. She follows the body. Right? Jesus is being taken off the cross. And evidently everyone else that actually watched the death of Jesus, they decided, all right, we're done, right? We're done, we're finished. And then Joseph goes and he makes claim for the body. And he takes the body off the cross and they wrap it up. And they're taking it to a graveside, and Mary Magdalene is just sneaking along, watching, where are they going to put my Jesus? 3 days later, we find her again. John chapter 20, verse 1 through 2. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." She's the alarm bell for the empty tomb. The two most prominent followers of Jesus, Peter and John, she's the one that goes and lets them know that Jesus is no longer in the tomb. You would think there would be some of those guys, some of his best friends and closest friends would be the first at the tomb on Sunday morning. If you were here last week, we talked about Jesus actually told what was going to happen to him numerous times. He said, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. This will be the result of what's happened. He says, they're going to hurt me. They're going to torture me. They're going to arrest me. They're going to put me on a cross. I'm going to die. I'm going to resurrect on the third day. He told them over and over again. And so you would have thought that the people that were closest to him, these guys, these friends, these apostles, these disciples, would have been there sun up Sunday morning. But they weren't. But she was. And immediately she runs to tell Peter and John. But here's the thing. They didn't believe her. They didn't believe her. Maybe it was because she had been demon-possessed at one time. Maybe it was because she was a woman. Maybe they just thought, you know what, wrong tomb. You probably went to the wrong tomb, Mary. Or maybe you got mixed up and you went to the wrong cemetery. It's the cemetery on the other side of town. You're looking in the wrong place. Who knows? But for sure they thought, you're not right, because this is the reaction. John chapter 20, verse 3 through 10, it says this. So Peter and the other disciples started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along with him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. He did not listen to Mary and believe. He did not listen to her testimony and believe. He saw and believed. She was an alarm bell, but still fairly insignificant. She could not, her words alone could not cause the belief. They had to see it for herself, because surely she was wrong. Surely she was mistaken. Surely she was confused. They still did not understand, verse 9, from the scriptures that Jesus had risen from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. What an abrupt end. And so she comes running. I don't know what Peter and John were doing early that Sunday morning, but she comes running, and maybe she knocks on the door, or maybe she kicks it down. I don't know what she does, but she walks into the room, and she's like, hey, the tomb is empty. I don't know where they put him. He's not there. We got to do something. I'm like, oh, no, that can't be right. And so they run to the tomb, and they get there, and then one guy's like doing this, and the other guy goes past him and goes in, and they're like, oh, dang, he is gone. You're right. You're right. He's not here. Let's go home. And that's what they do. Peter and John just like, we're going home. We're going back to where we stay, you know? You know what Mary did? She didn't go home. She didn't go back to where she was staying. We'll pick it up. The Bible tells us, verse 11, now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, woman, why are you crying? They have taken my Lord away, she said, and I don't know where they've put him. Her solution in the heat of the moment was, hey, I'm not going back to rest or regather. There's got to be a clue here somewhere. And I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. She's thinking the grave has been robbed. She was right. She just never thought it was God doing the breaking and exiting. She searches. Verse 14, at this she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will get him. Right? There's no crying there, right? There's no crying there. She's upset. She's lost her Lord. She has no idea. And this gardener shows up. He's like, hey, lady, why are you crying? And who are you looking for? And she just turns around. I just have this face. I don't know what Mary looked like, but I have this face, this stern, like, I don't know, teacher face is what I'm thinking. Like, I'm thinking like my 5th grade Miss Daltrey teacher looking at me saying, Clint, that's enough, right? That's what I'm thinking. When I read this, that's what it is. Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will go and get him. Now, I don't know how big Mary is, but Jesus is a dead grown man. You know, and she's like, I don't care where you put him, but I'll go and get him. I'll pick him up because Peter and John want to go play PlayStation back at the house, and I'll do it myself, right? I love Mary. Verse 16, Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. All she needed to hear was for him to say her name. In 2006, the Institute for the Study of Child Development decided to fund a study to discover what impact a child in a learning environment would have for him to hear their name in a repeated process, right? And so they were doing this study to equip teachers better to break through to students who are having difficulties. And so they wanted to just discover, hey, does having their name said to them in an affectionate way or just in any way at all have any result in the brain? And so the big word here, I'm going to have to read this. The medial prefrontal cortex, okay, there we go, we're done with the big words, is responsible for a process that make you who you are, right? This includes emotions, perspective taking, developing theories of the mind. Many of these processes just kind of run in a resting mode or in a background autopilot state. But essentially, they bring to life who you are as a person. The core pieces of your personality, those kind of things, that's where it is. And when they took a bunch of folks and they put them through this study, they came to a place where they recognized in that particular space in their brain They were exposed to the repeated sound of 4 different names, including their own, in random patterns. And they found that there's unique brain activity when someone hears their own name, whether it's expected or unexpected. In fact, the reaction was so powerful, they expanded the study to just normal adults, right? Just adults in any situation, and even into people who were in persistent vegetative states in the hospital on a ventilator. And they found that the brain activity spikes even in someone in a vegetative state when they hear their name. Now, let's take it a step further. Just imagine what it would be like to hear Jesus say your name to you. What would that feel like? The creator of the universe. And Jesus, we learn in the New Testament as he's the agent of creation. Right? For your name to be on his lips. For him to look at you and say your name. Is Jesus calling your name this morning? Can you hear him? We recap. She's a woman. She was from an unknown or from a known for nothing good kind of town, a Stewart Avenue type place. She had the stigma of demon possession. Did I mention she was a woman in the first century? Yeah. But listen to this resume we're about to spit off, okay? Just listen to it. But Mary Magdalene was the first to see the resurrected Jesus. The first. Do you know why she was the first to see the resurrected Jesus? Because she didn't go home. When things didn't go her way, she didn't just quit and go back. She stayed in the thick of it. Forever, throughout history and eternity, there's only going to be one person who was the first person to see Jesus resurrected from the dead. And it was the girl that stood outside the tomb saying, I'm going to find him. And she did. She was the first to believe in the resurrected Jesus. Seeing him's one thing, right? But to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, she's the very first person, real human, like you and I. She will be forever in the history books of eternity, the very first person to believe in Jesus' resurrection. It's her. Let's take it a step further. She was not only the first to believe, the first to see, she was also, let's read this, here we go, verse 17. Do not hold on to me, this is Jesus talking to her. For I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I've seen the Lord. She told them what he had said and these things to her, all that kind of stuff. So she's the first person to see the Lord after the resurrection. She's the first person to believe in the Lord after the resurrection. Here it is. Here it goes. Ready? She's the first person to tell anybody else about the resurrected Jesus. I don't know what number I am. Billions, or I don't know what's after. I don't know where I'm at but I have a number assigned to me of being someone who has told people about the resurrection. Each of you that have shared your faith with someone, you got numbered as well. But our numbers were way over there, and Mary was the very first one. And get this. This insignificant, from a nowhere, no good town, a woman in the first century who can't own property, who can't testify in court, whose brothers don't even believe when she's saying, hey, there's not a dead body in the tomb, right? She's the first one to tell the future leaders of the church, hey, remember all them times Jesus said he was coming back to life? He was telling the truth. She had no fear. She walked in to the room with everybody thinking he's dead and now he's gone. And she walked in to probably the most spiritually intimidating group you could have on the planet at the time. And she busts down the door and she says, I have seen the Lord. He's alive. Talk about significance. Here's the thing, though. Mary didn't want significance. She just wanted to be close to Jesus. She did not want significance. She just wanted to be close to Jesus. And everything changed when Jesus called her name. Maybe you don't know this morning. And maybe I'll just be Mary for you for a moment. And I'm going to say something. But I would imagine some of your reaction is going to be like, I'm not so sure. With this, I would encourage you to find out for yourself. It won't offend me if you get up and start running towards finding an answer to this question that might come from this statement that I'm going to give you. Let me be Mary for you for a moment. Jesus knows your name. He does. He knows your name. Even if you're one of those folks who go by your middle name, he actually knows that and your real first name that freaks everyone out when you're like in a public place or a government place and they're like calling you the wrong name. I said, that's not her. No, that's not him. His name ain't Charlie. Yes, it is. I don't know why Charlie happened. You're fine if you're Charlie. It's fine. He knows your name. Have you heard him call it before? Maybe you're thinking, if he knows my name, why haven't I heard him call it before? Why have I never heard Jesus say my name out loud? Why have I never heard that whisper in my ear? Why have I never heard this Jesus that you say is alive, that Mary says is alive, that now the Bible says is alive, that you say knows my name, that says that he's calling my name? Why have I never heard it? Well, let me ask you this. If you've never spent time with Jesus, how do you know what voice to listen for? How do you know? If you never spent time with him, how do you know what his voice sounds like? You see, Mary had spent time with Jesus, followed Jesus. So when he said her name, all of a sudden, everything that happened in that little place that I can't pronounce again, all that made her who she was, it spiked. And she was like, I know that voice. I don't quite recognize this resurrected Jesus in front of me, but I know that voice. See, check this out. Verse 17, do not hold on to me, this is Jesus talking, do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, here's where we want to listen. I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. You see, the reason Mary recognized the voice of Jesus is because they shared a Father. They shared a God. And you notice that Jesus takes a leap here in terms of just how we look at the Bible, how we look at ourselves. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Jesus is not saying, my God, and like your step God type thing, right? Or your adopted God, or I don't know, your fill-in God, or whatever it is that's not this bloodline God. Jesus is saying, hey, as much as I am authentically his son, you are authentically his daughter, right? Same thing. Same God, same Father. She had spent time with Jesus, so they shared the Father, they shared God. It is my hope that one day you will say, I have seen the Lord. That everyone in this place, that those words would come out of your mouth to a group of people that thought that he was just a really nice guy with a turn of bad luck that cost him his life. Maybe you ask, but how do you see the Lord? I would say, for starters, look around you. You are surrounded by a bunch of insignificant people, but we try to stay as close as we can to Jesus. And in doing so, God is doing incredibly significant things through our church, through his church. that we are not chasing significance. We just are chasing proximity to Jesus. Our ice cream truck just went over its 200th event just a few weeks ago. Our outreach into our community sometimes just feels limitless in how many things that we're digging into in the public school system. And doors just continue to open. But our outreach strategy is never a recruitment strategy. When we send someone out with the truck, or we send some people to an event, or we go volunteer somewhere, or we dig into a need in our community, the reason we do those things is not so those people that see us or that we interact with come to church. If you ever serve on any team, I promise, you will never have a lead ask you, and did any of those people come to church as a result of what you did? They won't. Because that's not how we measure things here. Because honestly, that is so not very important. You know the reason we do community outreach? The reason we go into our community to serve? It's not to get people to come to church. It's so that people see Jesus. That's it. And so that is a question you might ask. Hey, you know what? Things just kind of fell apart today. It was Friday night. We had this huge thing planned, and it rained, and it was cold. And everything didn't go as we wanted it to. That's not the question. The question is, did people see Jesus tonight? Answer the question. That's what we want to know. Did people see Jesus tonight? There's no question of, hey, did the people that showed up on Friday night, did they then show up on Sunday mornings? Nobody asked that question because we don't care. Our church doesn't exist to grow numerically and fill these seats. Our church exists to fill the kingdom of God with lost people. It's worth clapping for. That's what Jesus sent us here for. Honestly, at the end of the day, we didn't create the mission. We're just being obedient to it. We're just being obedient to it. And so maybe you sit here and you maybe feel a little bit like Mary. I'm just insignificant. I've got a past I can't escape. I got a past I can't escape, and I'm from a know-nothing good, know-nothing town, right? That maybe culturally I just don't have what it takes to be in a place of significance and influence. Maybe you still are searching for meaning in your life. Maybe you just haven't even found the start of what meaning is, and you're just like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm motion going here. And it's the same thing over and over again. Can I give you a simple piece of advice? An advice that I learned from studying the story of Mary of Magdala. Get close to Jesus. That's it. If you're struggling with insignificance, get close to Jesus. If the enemy is yapping in your ear, telling you how insignificant your life is, get close to Jesus. If you feel like things are spinning out of control, get close to Jesus. If you have questions about your life and the answers aren't coming from your friends or your Snapchats or your Facebook parent group or whatever it is, that's cool. Get close to Jesus. If you're facing the largest uphill battle in your life, get close to Jesus. If everything is perfect in your life and you're the most mature Christian here in the room, let me ask you a question. What would it take for you to take a step closer to Jesus? What could you do to take another step closer to Jesus?